Zach here from GBC out in San Fernando. I was about to take a multimodal adventure across Mendenhall Ridge. Now, this is Bike Week, and Vic and I are taking advantage of the free rides as we're going to take the Antelope Valley line out to Acton. This will allow us to cut across the Angeles National Forest, but it's about 50 miles and 5,000 feet of climbing. The good news is, because it's point-to-point action, we're actually losing 2,000 feet. So, let's glide. I love taking trains because it's a low-stress way of travel and far easier than packing your bike on a plane. Most are familiar with the Amtrak system, but California has a number of commuter lines that run more frequently and cover local areas better. Metrolink is the most robust, covering Los Angeles and 5 surrounding counties with 7 different lines. Our train showed up right on time as we were waiting at the San Fernando Sylmar station, looking for the specifically noted bicycle car that has plenty of space for bikes with no reservations needed, or was relaxing to pass the time. With the train moseying its way around canyon country, we had plenty of warning to grab our things, exiting out with ease at the Vincent Grade Acton station, starting off our 53-mile point-to-point adventure with most of the climbing efficiently done early on pavement. It wasn't a ceremonial start to begin with, as we rolled out with little fanfare and even less turning onto the Sierra Highway, which has graced this area since 1910, with the 14 off to the right now being the freeway of choice. And coming across another cyclist was the most noteworthy mention of this road. After a mile and a half, we veered onto Soledad Canyon Road that leads into central Acton, then quickly onto Aliso Canyon Road, where our climb would start. There were 2 options we could have taken for our start to Mill Creek Summit, and choosing Aliso Canyon Road was the quieter of the 2, deciding to avoid the more highly trafficked lower portion of the Angeles Forest Highway, even though it added 3 miles and a couple hundred feet of climbing, as all we had around us were a few spaced out homes and the dry-looking Santa Clara River even after a heavy rain season. 2 miles up, we crossed Avenue Y8, where the next 18 miles would see some crossover from our Indian Canyon gravel guide that looped us back into Acton, as today was a much clearer day, with Flora even carrying some highlights. And even with the occasional dips added in, you do feel like your effort increases overall as we progressed. But at least we still had a heartbeat. Well, so far our choice of taking Aliso Canyon is paying off. It's been very quiet so far. It's not paying off. Summer temperatures already. It's not even 9:30. A note in LA County is to always carry a demo reel, as you could be the next one. But our one focus was when the Angeles Forest Highway would avail itself, free not to worry about the presence of snow, making our first direction change in over a half hour that didn't pertain to the Z-axis. The reason why we avoided the bulk of this highway was pretty apparent early on, meaning I was glad to have a bit more visibility today, revealing more to be seen down below us, rather than what was coming ahead. But Angeles Forest Highway has a nice steady grade around 5% at a length of under 3 miles. And if you can spot the cutout ahead, then you can locate Mill Creek Summit that doesn't wear on you keeping a steady tempo, as you'll reach the top sooner than you think, which today looked like casting central for the next Fast movie, turning away from our climb to Mount Gleason, putting in just a little extra piece of vert to roll past the Mill Creek Fire Station, which would be a required stop as our last opportunity to get water in the forest. Backtracking might be an emergency to Strava snobs, making our way directly across the highway, able to avoid dodging all the influencers in our vicinity, Thankful the gate kept these vehicles at bay, as the Angeles Forest Highway looks so serene up here, which is strangely the point where you get cell phone reception. We had 6 miles of 99.9% pavement on Mount Gleason Road, with the first 2.25 being a moderate climb, enjoying the solitude of these mountains, whose silence can only be broken by rock slides and dad jokes.
That rocks. We're 16 miles in, already conquered about over half of our climbing, and it's a closed road. Pretty good so far. And we're starting to battle some of the hotter elements because we're already above a mile high. So, pleasant so far.
Leveling out the next 4 miles of Mount Gleason Road are bliss. Part of it is the ridge flipping to the other side, as getting a southern look into the Angeles National Forest is a vantage point that feels even more isolated than before, while there's still interest nearby, but the fun of this segment will be apparent to cyclists with a series of rollers with no attachment to direction, meaning the pleasure is all yours. While the route to Mendenhall Ridge continues to the left, I always get drawn to go straight ahead on the pavement, heading through the former site of Fire Camp 16, with the remains in its reduced form from the 2009 station fire, and this monument front and center, made to withstand any future outbreaks, commemorating the lives of firefighters Tim Mendenhall and Arnie Quiones, that is still a living and breathing tribute today. Continuing on down Mount Gleason Road, you would think our big gravel adventure had begun, as the surface seems pretty dedicated to dirt, with this segment lasting only a 1/4 mile, returning to our cracked pavement before bottoming out, starting our ascent to the peak with the first half mile lightly registering a grade, but be prepared to be awakened in a rude manner, with the next 1.5 miles averaging above 10%. And while I've reached Mount Gleason on a road bike before, there's a lot of debris to wade through, as this mountain is always chipping away at itself, reminding you that geology always wants to get noticed, with progress to this peak feeling vacant, grinding it out at times into the teens, and hopefully you'll appreciate the beauty in this landscape, juxtaposed between the lush ground cover against these wintry trees. That's an adjustment to absorb when they're in full foliage, as now Camp 16 seems way far below, with the final curve to the peak taking its own sweet time. But rather than continuing west on Mount Gleason Road, it's worth the extra couple minutes of climbing to top out at 6,500 feet at the peak itself. Obviously, there's some noticeable infrastructure up here, first because of a small gold strike in 1869, and later as a work camp and lookout tower removed in 1955. Remind you there's more history in these mountains than you think, and despite the pavement, it doesn't continue on Mount Gleason Road, hitting an unmistakable junction 1.5 miles down, with the right leading you onto Santa Clara Truck Trail and our previous diversion down Indian Canyon, with our Mendenhall adventure starting to our left, paired with the Lightning Point campground just beyond, meant we now had all this downhill ahead of us. But did that mean speed? With the gates open, you assume everything's on the up and up, taking in the first of 3 downhill segments, each having its own distinct flavor, with the initial holding a reddish tint in good condition, except for the enormous amount of down trees, which you really can't just push aside, that only serves to temper your momentum and forces you into full body escapery, making it confusing why the surface is in fine relative shape considering the lack of maintenance in the off months, as after some length you flip to the south side of the ridge that halts your loss in elevation for the time being. Starting this 1¼ mile climb seems palatable, being our longest on Mendenhall today, averaging just 4%, with the Condor Peak Trail for more robust bikes appearing on the left, but again, you think someone is really protecting their KOM, as being back on the north side of the ridge introduces this shaly rock leading into segment 2 of our downhilling that has a common theme over the next 4¼ miles, which had less occurrences of dismounting, but far more brake-inducing impediments, and the views are great when it opens up, when you're not dodging the shrubbery, and a short quarter mile in the middle gives your brake pads a rest, returning to rock avoidance mode, while hoping not to have your partner disappear. There was one last climb left, only chiming in at 6% for a half mile, with the opportunity to stargaze to the south again at the top, and starting our final chapter of descending made me wonder if we chose the right direction, as months earlier we attempted making a video from the opposite way, not making too far into our archives as this happened.
Oh, unbelievable!
This meant we were going to get a taste of the segment turning tail, which felt playful and expansive despite dialing it back for Vic's tire, and while the last 6 miles wasn't completely void of obstacles, it clearly was the funnest of the day. Hitting the gate meant we reached pavement at Little Tujunga Canyon, and while we could have continued back on dirt on Cagle Canyon, there were a few disincentives along the way, so we decided to descend down Little T, pretty much wiping away the rest of our elevation gains in 6 miles. That's a G-enforcing way to go, without normally other traffic to contend with, as our ears regained pressure at the polo grounds, meaning the rest of the ride was pretty standard, with the last ½ dozen miles passing us through San Fernando and by some of our favorite spots, returning us back to the station by different means than we had left it.
Today worked out pretty good. Even though Mendenhall is a little chewy, I'm glad we did it in that direction. We got the tough stuff out of the way first, and then it was a lot of fun in the second half. Also, smart move that we did the train first, because what if we had a mishap and had to catch it on the way back? Because yeah, I'd love to use the train more. You know, every day may not be Sunday, but every week can be a bike week. Anyways, if you want to support us, go ahead to the subscribe button, or support us on Patreon, or go to our shop so we can bring you more. Stay dirt.